All right, so I've always been a fan of the Lethal Weapon series. I've talked about it a lot. I believe on this show. If not, my close friends they know I love Lethal Weapon. I actually remember when I was a kid, I went to the movies to see something back in 1998, and in St. Thomas, we only had one movie theater, and it showed three movies. One of the movies that they were showing that same night, I want to believe it was Small Soldiers. I think it was Small Soldiers that I saw. They switched one of the movies overnight into Lethal Weapon 4, 1998. And at that point, I had not seen any of the other Lethal Weapon movies. And the following week, went back to the movies, which was actually like 2 blocks from my house. I live on Third Street. The movies was on like Fifth Street, and we went and saw Lethal Weapon, and I was amazed by it. I loved the movie. It was fun, full of action, full of comedy. It was like a family movie at that point, and I loved it. And I was like, Lethal Weapon 4. Like I don't think I'd ever seen like a movie go up to like number 4 up until that point. But I'd always been a fan of Lethal Weapon and been a fan of Sean Black, who is the writer of the Lethal Weapon movies. And then come to find out Richard Donner was the director of those movies. And I was always in heavy anticipation for a fifth Lethal Weapon. And being our both Mel Gibson and Danny Glover, Mel Gibson, obviously he's had his own personal stuff and has been controversial, but he's been starring in movies. And Danny Glover, of course, has still been around doing different type of things. Even the older he's gotten, um, I always had like an outside hope that the gang could all get back together. Rene Russo, um, Joe Pesci, Danny Glover, Mel Gibson, and they would.
Chris Rock.
Well, no, yeah, well, in the last movie, Chris Rock, but in the whole shebang bang. I was hoping there would be a fifth Lethal Weapon film, and the closest I'd gotten to that was It's
Mm.
Always Sunny in Philadelphia, which actually gave us some fan fiction Lethal Weapon 5 and Lethal Weapon 6.
Hey, but well, now we can't. They took those off the air, man.
They took them out.
They
Why
got.
would I?
I got the
Why?
Blu-ray.
Why would I poison the tap water? I drink tap water.
Oi, starting the party without me. Oi. But yeah, '98 was a big year. I think maybe I played like the Lethal Weapon video games, saw them on TV, but I only saw part four. I saw part four in theaters. It was '98, summer '98. Small Soldiers around that time too. And that opening scene kind of was like, whoa, with the flamethrower was
Yeah, we walked into the movies late, so I only really saw like Danny Glover on the street with his in his drawers
yeah,
dancing in the rain and fire. Yeah,
but it looked like a superhero movie. It was great. It looked like the end of a movie. You know how like James Bond would always have like of course, who I'm talking to, but they would have like an action sequence in the beginning. It was kind of like a mini movie, and then it would start with the whole
yeah,
movie.
pre-title sequence.
Yeah, like a cold open type deal. All right, but so Richard Donner, he had a very lengthy career.
Yeah.
91. He worked up until the last 15 years. But Richard Donner, when I hear his name, I think of Superman. I think of Goonies. I actually forgot that he did Lethal Weapon. He worked with Mel Gibson a lot. He worked on Maverick with him.
Yeah,
Uh,
which was based on the old TV show with
yeah, James Garner.
James Garner. Yeah.
And so that came out in the '90s. But interesting enough, Richard Donner got his start in cowboy western serials in like the '50s. So basically, if you go back to the beginning of his career, he was trying to be a photographer at NYU. He's from New York City. He's from the Bronx. So he went to NYU for a while. Yeah, got to represent. We lost a lot of greats. We lost the Marshalls recently. We spoke about Nichols and Neil Simon. A lot of people from that area. Batman, the guy who created Batman, Bat Kane, Bob Kane. I mean. So after he tried NYU for a while, he went out west. He went out to LA. He started directing. He was an assistant to someone. Then he started working on commercials with Desi Liu, very famous Desi Arnaz, Lucille Ball's production company, who they basically built.
Survived after the divorce.
They basically created like the structure of how they made TV sitcoms, and just like the production style lasted until everything nowadays is like one camera shots. But when it was multi cameras, and that was how it was for like decades. That was Desi Liu. So he got his start there as like in his early 20s. Then he got his first gigs as directing TV shows. Ironically enough, me and Shug, we've been reading the Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and they mention a lot of westerns. You know, he worked on similar shows. Have Gun Will Travel. They talk about that. Wild Wild West. The Fugitive was very famous 50s show, early 60s. I'm just moving on now. He did Get Smart, which was like the
Mel Brooks.
spy. Yeah. What do you call it? Kojak was a very popular show. He did a very, very famous Twilight Zone episode. He directed the one with William Shatner when he's on the airplane and he flips out.
Yeah, she's the thing on the plane,
Yeah,
on the wing.
Nightmare. Yeah, there's something on the plane. The whole thing. Nightmare on 20,000 feet. Nightmare at 20,000 feet. Very famous one. Then he did another one that I'm not that familiar with, even though I used to always watch the marathons. But yeah, that was the 60s. He worked on a Charles Bronson picture.
Yeah, a
X-15.
great person who actually filmed a movie in the Virgin Islands in St. Thomas, my hometown, and it's cool because I looked it up on YouTube. It was a really elaborate chase scene that took place on like this area that I've grew up on, so I always love to watch it.
Yeah, and Mary Tyler Moore's first acting role was in that. It was produced by Frank Sinatra, so it had the pro government, like how Sinatra was buddies with JFK. So the X-15 was this like fighter
Escobar
plane,
Brothers.
yeah, fighter plane that was having negative. They were having negative press, so they made it kind of like a propaganda film to like promote the X-15 as like a really awesome thing that we should all get behind. So that was a big deal for him. He did Banana Splits in the late '60s.
The card, the with
Yeah, that weird show.
the mascots and
Yeah,
the
he worked on that. But yeah, so then in the
costume.
'70s, we talk about it often, especially now that we're talking about the Once Upon a Time in Hollywood again. Satanic things. We talked about some Sons of Sam, where in the late '60s, early '70s, Satanism was like a big deal, big back in a big fucking way. So they had the Rosemary's Baby, they had Exorcist, and then Richard Donner worked on one of the most popular movies of that genre, The Omen. Uh, I'm very familiar with it. It was a whole franchise. And then he got another franchise right after that was Superman, bringing the Man of Steel to the big screen for the first time, a legit big screen.
Yeah, he did one and a half Superman movies.
Yeah, so let's jump into that. That's a big part of who Richard Donner is. So they filmed part one, and while they were filming part one, they were shooting scenes for part two at the same time.
Yeah, it was one of the first few movies. It's I wouldn't say it's I wouldn't say it's something that's common now. I do believe in the 2000s it was common where movies would do the sequels at the same time as they did the original movie, or do part two and part three side by side to keep like costs down, because it's a lot easier because the sets are already up. You already have the actors on schedule, so you don't have the scheduling conflicts. Because how many times you watch like a sequel and it's like a character is not in it, and then you come to find out it's like, oh, because that person was like doing another movie. But it's much easier if they're already contracted to do one movie one day, and then the next day they're you know doing the next movie. But the Salkinds was like a father and son like production team who had gained the rights to the Superman movies. Today, IPs, intellectual properties, it's like a huge deal. We talked about it a little bit in the Once Upon a Time in the West segment last week, but back then it really wasn't. Like if you got the rights to Superman, the character, and you wanted to make a movie on them, back then it was akin to like getting the rights to like it was like akin to getting the rights to like making a Two and a Half Men, trying to
Mm.
make that into like a movie franchise. It was like looked up upon that way. Like if you wanted to get Two and a Half, well, I don't know, because Chuck Lorre's, like he's probably very like protective of his stuff. Because in the '70s, this was when like comic books started to decline. Because as you've seen, after the Superman series, there was like a gap until 1989 when Batman came out, where superhero movies just weren't being made, or the only superhero movies or comic book movies that were being made were like obscure, like Howard the Duck,
Turtles, yeah. Feel that.
Ninja Turtles, yeah. But they really had no kind of plan for the Superman series. All they knew was that they wanted their hands in it, and they were kind of like micromanaging. And being that Superman 1 and 2 were being filmed back to back, Richard Donner actually had enough footage to make like a full movie before actually being finished with Superman, and focusing on finishing the footage for Superman 2. But they fired him after Superman 1 and hired Richard Lester to do Superman 2. And he did Superman 2 and he did Superman 3. And Superman 2 is not as good as the first Superman movie. And Superman 3 is, you know, Mike,
Goofy.
have you ever seen Superman 3?
I have it right there. It was Richard Pryor.
Yeah,
Um,
it wasn't a good movie.
it's memeable. A lot of weird memes, like when he's like bad. Superman turns bad, so he has like a stubble and shit. It's like a goofy movie.
Yeah,
But
and then Superman 4.
yeah, these are iconic
Um,
movies to me though because I saw them all the time on Channel 11 WB. They would always show them in the like on the, but they weren't great pictures.
yeah, but Superman 4. If you've seen the Superman 2, it used a lot of Richard Donner footage,
Mm.
and it was I believe like Margot Kidder, God rest her soul, and Christopher Reeves, God rest his soul. And I think Gene Hackman also said it was like Superman 2. It's like 75% Richard Donner and then like 25% Richard Lister. And it's not as good as the first movie. And then when you watch Superman 3, which was Richard Lister, it's not good. And then Superman 4, Quest for Peace, is horrible. And that was like some like B movie director that directed that. That's not a good movie. So they did a horrible job in letting Richard Donner go.
Yeah, but Gene Hackman wouldn't come back for reshoots. Like when they filmed the scenes for part two, and they brought in the new director. Gene Hackman didn't come back. He didn't want to film anything new. Richard Lester, he filmed this. He made it more silly and more campy. Richard Donner's was more like straightforward and like realistic. He no credit. He didn't want his name on it and everything because it wasn't his project anymore. But famously, in 2006, they released a Donner cut on DVD.
Yeah,
You remember that was a big deal because they made part five, basically. They made Superman Returns with kind of a protege of Richard Donner, Uncomfortable, but Bryan Singer. He did Superman Returns, and Richard Donner cut came out at the same time as Superman Returns came out on DVD. And it was a big deal. I
yeah.
remember it being a huge deal.
Because Superman Returns was it was shot as a direct sequel to Superman 1 or Superman 2. I can't remember, but it was a direct sequel to the Christopher Reeves movies. And if you watch the movie, it's kind of done in the same way. And I think that's where like they kind of did it like a disservice,
Mm-hmm.
because like at the time I was like 16, and
Yeah,
I hadn't like I've seen, like you said, Channel 11. Like I've seen Superman on Channel 11, but I can't. That wasn't my association of Superman.
Right. Um,
Like at that time, Batman Begins had came out the year before, so there was like this whole new grounded take on superheroes, and Superman Returns wasn't that. But the Donner cut did get released like around the same time, if not like a year after.
and this sounds familiar to a lot of people because this happened recently with Snyder. Remember, release the
Yeah,
Snyder cut. So that's why it's kind of important.
yeah. I actually had that in my notes, and I'm like, this is the reason why you got the Snyder cut, because the Richard Donner cut of Superman 2 was referred to as the Donner cut, and that was campaigned by Margot Kidder, who played Lois Lane in those movies. She was like, Richard Donner, like the stuff he shot, it would be a movie in of itself. Like we had to go in, like we as in her and Christopher Reeves and Gene Hackman, Ned Beatty.
Mm.
Also, I want to shout out Ned Beatty. He passed away. We didn't. I keep forgetting to bring him up. He passed away in between um the last few episodes. So R.I.P. Ned Beatty, famous actor, was in a lot of things. Deliverance,
Great in life.
great.
He was-
Yeah. The Shooter was probably one of his last famous films. So I just wanted to mention him. But all of them, they came back and they recorded these scenes to make it into a whole another movie. But Richard Donner had basically done a whole movie, and then when you watch like the Donner cut, it's like, oh, okay, this is different.
mm.
And it much in the same way of when you watch Joss Whedon's Justice League, and then you watch the Snyder cut, which is like 4 hours long, whereas like Joss Whedon's like version is like an hour and like 45 minutes. But all that extra time, it adds substance to the film. And I don't think the Snyder cut gets done if almost 20 years after the Donner cut gets
Mm.
released after Superman 2, and it's like, oh, like, yeah, there was a better movie. Why didn't we get to see this version? This is the definitive version of Superman 2.
It's like art versus the business side, which Richard Donner was doing the whole art side of it. Like he stood up to the producers, and he won in the end. His cut is going to be the one that people remember.
Yeah.
So after that, he made another famous movie, The Toy. That's a really
Yeah.
popular movie with Richard Pryor, Jackie Gleason, and everyone knows the Goonies.
Yeah.
Goonies is 1985.
That's that right there
Other thing,
is
iconic.
like my mom's favorite movie
Mm.
of all the movies of all time. And she was a whole cinephile as a child. Goonies is her favorite movie. And Richard Donner did that. Steven Spielberg produced it.
Mm.
It's a grand scale movie. Robert Davi has a lot of famous like actors that became famous afterwards. Sean Astin, Josh Brolin.
Joey Pants.
Hmm.
Moan. He does the whole opera thing,
Yeah.
Davi. Sloth, the mom from Mama from the Train.
Hmm.
Corey Feldman.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
short round, isn't it?
Yeah. He
Uh,
was on it. Yeah.
uh,
That was after. No. Yeah, it was
after.
after.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so this is 85. Apparently there's a 4-hour cut somewhere of Goonies,
Hmm.
and if you
Donner
follow
cut.
Donner cut, release it. But in the music video, they show clips of it. Like I posted a lot of pro wrestling. He's gonna puke. I have the music video for Goonies because like Roddy Piper's in it and Iron Sheik's in it, and they have like different things that are in the movie that was cut, but they show it in the music video. So that's the only time you would be able to see this. Like, there's a whole sequence with like a giant squid, because Goonies is like kids used to play, like treasure hunt, and this is just like it come to life. It's basically like a kid Indiana Jones babies, Muppet babies, Indiana Jones treasure map movie.
Yeah, and what do we call each other? Goonies. What do you call your boys? My Goonies.
Goonies never die.
Yeah.
Good enough for the Goonies. But yeah, that's an iconic movie. And then this movie came out the same exact year Lady Hawk. It's very cult. It's a cult hit. You know, like I used to see it on TV. I never really got into it. It was kind of like a medieval Game of Thrones type deal. That broke even. Big budget broke even. But Goonies, we're still talking about it now. Like it's like a huge title. So that came out the same year. So people kind of forgot that he had that flop with Lady Hawk, and but it became like a hit later on with like VHS and you know, kids who watched it back then. They talk about it. Uh, Lethal Weapon.
Mm-hmm.
So back that was '87. You know, Mel Gibson is one of the main guys in the buddy movie.
Yeah,
But
and it,
but
it it broke the mold because if you think about all like the buddy or the interracial like buddy cop movies, it's funny as hell because I was watching Dave, with Lil Dicky. That show is second season, and this past episode it was talking about, was like, how many buddy cop movies, like how many buddy movies are there with like black people in it, and like Lil Dicky's like, Rush Hour, and it's like that's an Asian and like a black dude. It's never like two black guys. But I would reckon, in relation to our movie, I'd be like, Friday is like the
mm.
like the one black buddy movie. And there's like a shit ton of them in like the '70s, Coolie High, but that's
Well, what
neither
about
here.
Strictly Business? You ever seen Strictly Business? That's not really a buddy movie. That's like more of like a, you know what I'm talking about though, right?
Yeah,
With
with Holly Berry. I haven't seen it, but yeah, I know the movie.
it's
Um,
a uptight guy and a cool guy. So
yeah, but like if you watch like the buddy cop movies, whenever it was like a black guy and like a white guy, like the white guy would be like the straight, and then the black guy would be
mm,
like the screwball guy.
48 hours.
48 hours, Nick, yeah, 48
Mm,
hours, Nick Nolte, Eddie Murphy, all these different movies. But Lethal Weapon was the first one where the white guy was the wild card and the
mhm,
black guy was like the straight. And it's just like, I don't want to deal with this fucking, like, this dude's crazy. Like,
mm,
I want to just, I'm like 3 weeks to retirement.
mhm,
Like, I don't need this shit.
mm,
Like I've been without a partner for like the last 5 years. Like, why are you putting me with this guy? And that's what Lethal Weapon did. And they did it for 4 movies, and it's great. And there's a point in the third movie where they're on a boat and they're drunk, and Riggs, played by Mel Gibson, is telling Murtaugh, he's like, what do you have to be sad about? Because this was after like Murtaugh had killed one of his son's childhood friends. Unfortunately, his son's like childhood friend got involved with a gang, and he was forced to kill him in like a shootout because he didn't realize it was him. It was just him
mm,
shooting like gang members. Because they had these heavy artillery guns that were provided by like the bad guys, and Murtaugh, played by Donnie Glover, he was on a boat and he was like just drinking and depressed and wanted to be by himself. And Riggs was telling him, he's like, what do you mean? I don't mean anything to you. Like, you're my best friend. Like, your family, they're my family. He was like, I have 3 beautiful kids. They're yours. Like, I have breakfast every day at your house. And it was like the first time you actually seen like not only two guys of different races and different backgrounds being friends. It was like they were fucking family. And then in Lethal Weapon 4, the last shot, which is why I kind of feel like if they never make a Lethal Weapon 5, which as time goes on, because Lethal Weapon 4 was 20 years ago and they were already like pretty old then, I'm fine with the last shot. The whole crew, everybody who they accumulated over the 4 different movies, Joe Pesci, Chris Rock, like you talked about, they had kids, and they all got in like this family picture. And it was like, are you? And the doctor taking a picture was like, are you guys friends? And it's like, no, we're family. And it's like everybody all together that we've seen throughout these 4 movies. That was the first time you've seen that, and I was Richard Donner that directed that.
And it's really rare that he did all four, Richard Donner.
Yeah.
Like like Die Hard, he went to jail, Tiernan. Like he had to go to jail for part two. So he did Die Hard 1 and with a Vengeance. So
Hmm.
like the tones are different, but with Lethal Weapon, all four, they made them all in 11 years. And shockingly enough, 98, they started filming the movie in January of 98. It came out in July, which is
Hmm.
crazy. That turnaround for that movie. That's crazy. Think about that.
The third movie?
No, fourth.
Where you? Oh,
I-
Lethal
In
Weapon.
January, yeah, Lethal Weapon 4. They
Okay.
started filming it in January 98. It came out in July. That's
Okay.
crazy. That's a quick turnaround. But again, the main point is that Richard Donner did all four, which is very interesting. And you don't even see that with like Spielberg movies. You don't even see that with like Star Wars or like Indiana Jones type deals. It's always a little something different. But they got it all done in 10 years. It was great.
Yeah,
I
and he's more influential to like me and your generation than a lot of people think because um him and his wife, who's now his widow, unfortunately, um they produce the Free Willy
Mhm.
series. So that's something we grew up on as kids. But they also produced the first X-Men movie, which might have been the first huge superhero franchise movie because it lives on to this day. Because
Yeah.
technically, if they make another Deadpool movie, it's still branched off from X-Men, this X-Men movie that he produced. I mean, unfortunately, he also produced the worst X-Men movie, which was Origins Wolverine.
That was terrible.
Yeah.
I remember we left. That's like me and my brother were like, oh, we gotta go. We gotta go. It was a midnight showing. We were like, oh, this is like we were like gleefully laughing. But
I bootlegged that.
in the same exact theater, 9 years earlier, I saw X-Men in theaters. It was a moment. It was a big moment, packed. Asses that like everyone was packed in the theater. Uh, Logan Wolverine wakes up, and I saw this in Cross County. So like Patrick Stewart's Professor X, and he goes, "Oh, good morning, Logan or Wolverine, whatever. Where am I? You're in Westchester." And some guy behind me goes, "Represent," which is funny. Like one of those moments where people were like yelling in the crowd and like everyone was just like looking at each other smiling. The next moment after that was probably Freddy vs. Jason, and then after that was Dark Knight.
Yeah.
Fun moments, popcorn movies. Are you familiar with Radio Flyer?
No.
Okay, very weird movie now looking back, but it was always on TV on the movie channels growing up. It came out in the early 90s. Um, there's a weird cameo with Tom Hanks where it's like a bookend where he starts the movie and he's talking to his kids, and then it goes to his childhood. And it's what's his name from North? Joshua. What's his name again?
Elijah Wood.
Elijah Wood is like the older brother, and the kid from Jurassic Park and Star Kid is the younger brother. And when I was watching as a kid, I didn't really notice that it was about it was about abuse. Like the stepdad was like drunk all the time, and Radio Flyer, like he flies away in like a homemade plane, and Lorraine Bracco is like the mom, and it's kind of like a coming of age tale. And I just used to watch it all the time. So not a lot of people like remember it, but I used to see it all the time. And Scrooged, another character, like Superman, he had to turn that to life. He turned a classic character, Ebenezer Scrooge, did a little twist with it with Bill Murray, and Scrooge is one of my favorite like holiday movies, and comedies in general.
Hmm.
So Richard Donner did that one, So
Yeah, Scrooge was like a great movie, and the interesting thing about that is it's shown during Christmas time because, of course, it's based off of Scrooge,
Christmas Carol.
um, by or Christmas Story by Christmas Carol
Mhm.
by Charles Dickens, but it actually was released in the summer.
That's weird.
Yeah.
Uh, it is a weird movie though. Richard Donner, Goonies, that Gremlins. A lot of those movies came out with different. Joe Dante made Gremlins, but those movies I used to always think of them that they were. Ooh, the same people made these. It was kind of like how
Yeah,
Marvel movies have the same vibe to it, but it's like different directors and stuff. It was kind of like Spielberg's Boys.
Here's the thing I always felt about Richard Donner. I knew he was like up there in age. Like every time I looked at him, I was like 86, 90, 91, and then he finally passed off. I was at 91. I was just like, why is he not talked about in the same way as like a Steven Spielberg? I can understand with the Oscars, but like a George Lucas. Like these were all like these blockbuster movie directors, and he's involved in all of these film franchises. And I was just curious as to why he's not included in that group.
Yeah, but he was around from what, the 50s all the way up through the big 80s blockbusters. Um, and it reminded me of I was thinking about Richard Donner a lot while I was reading the chapters of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. So because he worked on those type of shows in the 50s and it was linked to that.